Welcome, everyone. We will be providing interpretation at today's session. I will be making this announcement in English and Spanish. Bienvenidos. Proporcionaremos interpretación en la sesión de hoy. Haré este aviso en inglés y en español. We invite everyone to please select English if you are a monolingual English speaker. This way you will be able to hear the interpreters from Spanish to English, should anybody make a comment in Spanish. Presenters, please remember to speak at a moderate pace because we do use 30% more words in Spanish. If you are on your computer, at the bottom you will see a globe that says interpretation. Put a check mark on your preferred language. If you are on your cell phone or tablet, locate the three dots, tap it lightly, and put a check mark on your preferred language. Be sure to click Done in order to activate and begin the interpretation. Friendly reminder, if you see the interpreter raise the virtual hand, please make sure to speak slower. Les invitamos a todos a seleccionar el español si únicamente habla usted en español. De esta manera podrá escuchar a las intérpretes del inglés, interpretar del inglés al español. Si está en su computadora, verá un globo terráqueo en la parte inferior de su pantalla que dice interpretación. Ahí podrá seleccionar el español. Selecciónelo mediante una palomita. Si está usando su celular o tableta, ubique y toque los tres puntitos ligeramente, ponga una palomita en español y seleccione Done o finalizar. Este último paso es muy importante para poder activar la presentación. Thank you very much. And now I'll let Denise take it away.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Nothing for Us Without Us, shifting power by centering those most impacted by health inequities. Make sure you join us again for our session tomorrow, and we'll be so happy that you're able to attend. So I'm the facilitator, Denise Webb, and before we even start, I feel like it's important for us to level set on why we are here today. So this session will feature trailblazers at the front of health justice. Their unique lived experiences aid them in driving their work to center communities that are directly impacted by health inequities. So today we will hear from activists and organizers who will be describing how to mobilize communities to create long-lasting change. We will also be taking a deep dive into how the story of self can help mobilize and transform policies and practices. First, I want to welcome all of our amazing speakers who will be giving us insight and valuable perspectives and also long-lasting knowledge. And to all of our participants, the chat box is open and our panelists will respond as time permits, but we do encourage you to engage with one another in the chat box. And if you do have larger questions, we will field those questions at the end if we have time remaining. I'm so excited to be here and even more excited to kick us off with some introductions. So please introduce yourself and share what brings you into this impactful and powerful work. We can go ahead and start off with Ola.
Hi everyone, my name is Ola Ojewumi, and you might not be able to tell by looking at me, but at age 11, I had a heart and kidney transplant. And since then, I've been on medication and I will be on medication for the rest of my life. It has inspired me to become a disability justice advocate because, as you can't see from the video, I am a wheelchair user too. I've survived 2 life-changing organ transplants and a post-transplant cancer. I have an autoimmune disease and I have a muscular disease. I wasn't expected to live to see the age of 20, and here I am at 32 years old, thriving and surviving because of access to healthcare. But this isn't something that was given to me. This is something that I had to fight for as a teenager and a college student. I'm also the founder and director of an education nonprofit called Project Ascend. We provide college scholarships to disabled youth, and we also are a grant program. So we disseminate grants to youth-led service projects across the country and in Central America and Western Africa. I will say this, as a young Black woman with a disability, I always knew that I was going to have to fight to keep my health care. When I was in college, my father's health insurance repeatedly tried to kick me off. You had to be registered to go to be able, you had to be registered full-time college student, even with the multitude of health issues I had. I had to be a registered full-time college student in order to stay on my parents' insurance. 30 days of one of my medications cost over $2,000, and I take 22 pills a day. So imagine the financial burden that is on me as a young adult. So I started working in politics. I worked in the Obama administration in the Obama White House. I was a public policy and international affairs fellow at Berkeley. In addition, I gave a viral speech with Senator Cory Booker about the importance of saving the Affordable Care Act when there were multiple attempts by the Trump administration to repeal it. I gave a speech on Capitol Hill. I even testified before the Congressional House and Ways and Means Committee about the importance of why affordable health care is needed to create equity for disabled Americans like me. It's my pleasure to be here to speak with this amazing group of panelists, and thank you for hearing my story.
Okay, Jenny Marie, you can go up.
Thank you. Well, first and foremost, I want to welcome everyone. Thank you for taking the time out to listen to all of the beautiful panelists we have today. So I worked as a youth organizer, a fellow, and a facilitator at the GEM Project. For those of you who don't know what the GEM Project is, it's a nonprofit based in Newark where we organize programs in the 3 justice pillars of education, health, and criminal justice. And so I'm a fellow. I started off as a fellow, and then I worked my way up to become a fellow facilitator, where I facilitate. This year we did health. So I'm also a graduate at Montclair State University, where I earned my bachelor's degree in justice studies, where I also, before that, went to Bard High School Early College and received my associate's degree. So I am a Newark, New Jersey native, born and raised, 24 years there, and still plan on staying there to create my own nonprofit in the future. So everyone, please wait on that one. So throughout my tenure at the GEM Project, I have taken on projects that has enabled me to offer peer-based support, counseling, and facilitate a number of workshops we have, which discuss topics like advocacy and social justice. I've also co-facilitated workshops at the Victoria Foundation, and where we inaugurated a Next Gen Grantmakers initiative, where I assisted Newark youth in developing their own grant-making process in partnership with the GEM Project, where they distribute $50,000 to Newark-based organizations. Most recently, I worked to support the redetermination process of New Jersey's family care / Medicaid in partnership with the GEM Project and the 4 legislative branches, the regional hubs, and Greater Newark Healthcare Coalition. And so where we facilitated workshops to kids in Newark, and then we prepared them to go outside in the real world and talk to people and advocate for the new program. Not the new program, but the redetermination process of Medicaid. And currently now, I am assistant teacher at a school in Montclair Cooperative. It's actually my last week here. I'm transitioning to a new job at Brick School in Newark, New Jersey, and I will be a site coordinator there. And then on my free time, I love to go to community events and help wherever I can and do photography. I hope that gave you like a little glimpse of my life, and I will pass it on to the next person. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome again, and thank you for having us. My name is Daniela Runyambo, and I work with Refugee Community Partnership. We are located in Carrboro, North Carolina. 15 years ago, my family moved to the United States. My family and I moved to the United States from the Democratic Republic of Congo. The first thing that I found when I moved here, I was really impressed by the advanced system in the United States, particularly the healthcare system, especially coming from a country with limited health infrastructure. I saw my father, who was a medical director in the region of South Kivu, work with less support from the government, but mostly alone, and a lot of the foreign aid that he was receiving to build hospitals and clinics in remote areas so that people can have access to health. So you can tell that when I moved to the United States, I was not only impressed by the advanced system, but also felt this gratitude, had this gratitude attitude that a lot of refugee and asylee feel when they move to the United States. And a lot of the time, we feel this deep sense of gratitude that sometimes can blind us to the reality of things. So initially, I never really questioned the systems here in the United States. They appeared really developed. Instead, as a teenager, I was really familiar with, I was very comfortable navigating system due to just my background and my family background. I started volunteer to help my community navigating the healthcare system, mainly due to language barrier. Despite the fact that I lacked necessary skills to do so. But I could communicate in English well enough to be understood. So I felt like that was enough. And many hospitals that I supported my members in my community navigate, they felt like that was enough. So while in college, I had read articles about healthcare disparities and inequities. I didn't really pay too much attention to those until I had to navigate the healthcare system for myself when I gave birth to my first son. My experience was really unsettling. I wasn't heard. I remember going to the hospital, and when they had a good pregnancy, if I could call it that. And I remember being in that bed, and the monitor showing me that my son's heart rate wasn't well, and it was making this noise. And I called the doctor, begging them to give me a C-section, because you can tell from their own monitor that my son wasn't doing well and being ignored. The doctors who could tell me were just telling me, you're going to be fine. We've seen this plenty of times, so you'll be fine and your child will be fine. But unfortunately, that led to my son having brain damage because of the lack of quick response and appropriate care when I needed it. But that wasn't the end. I suffered from preeclampsia, hypertension, hemorrhage, and the whole time, every time I would seek for support, I was just being ignored. I remember reading about Black women asking for pen med when they're in labor and being ignored. And I never thought that was reality until I was ignored myself and just completely ignored. Not because they couldn't understand me, not because they couldn't communicate right, but just ignoring me. I remember going to the hospital a couple of times, just telling them that I wasn't feeling good. And the only time that they will take care of me, which saved my life 3 times, was when I will mention something like, you are discriminating against me because I'm Black. You are discriminating against me because I'm an immigrant, because of my accent. And only then I saw people reacting, because nobody wanted to be labeled as such. So by grace, I that spared my life, but it wasn't until I had to say those words to feel like I was seen. And later on, they came to find out that they left pieces of the placenta in me, and that's why I was bleeding, and I had preeclampsia. But it wasn't until I had to do something, I had to say something, I had to mention those words of discrimination for them to react. So this experience is what led me to this work. I started asking myself questions about how, if this is happening to me, I've received an education here, I can communicate in English. What about other women? What about other people? What about other refugees and immigrants who are not able to go through this, to advocate for themselves? So these experiences that I had, particularly the experience that I had when I was giving birth to my first child, what motivated me to be in this work. Now we work with refugee and immigrants, helping and supporting the community rebuild their home, helping them survive, but also thrive. But also we also work with amplifying their voices to advocate for changes in our systems. So that's a little bit about my story and why I am in this space right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Daniela. And to all the other panelists, I'm completely in awe of the work that all of y'all do. It's also wonderful to just see the spaces that we've shared. Jenny Marie, I actually studied undergrad at Bard, so I'm familiar with Bard Early College. To Ola, I also served as an ambassador to the White House Initiative for Educational Excellence for African Americans under the Obama administration. And Daniela, I'm aware of the fight for our health in ways that are frustratingly common And it's that commonality for women of our experience that really drives me to do this work. I'm Sage Dolan Sandrino. I am a queer and trans creative strategist, creative director, and I currently serve as the Monica Roberts Fellow at the National Black Justice Coalition, where I assist and lead in the production of our creative campaigns for the liberation of Black, queer, and trans folks. Specifically, that is my focus in all of my life is using my talent and calling as a creative and a storyteller to tell the stories that reflect, honestly, the experiences of Black and brown, queer, and trans folks like myself. I'm tied to this conversation for many reasons, and a lot have to center around my transition. I transitioned 10 years almost ago, and I mean socially. So that was in the middle of my 8th grade year. Before then, a lot of my baby pictures, I'm wearing dresses, and the only way that I could ever conceptualize myself was as a girl. And it wasn't really till I went to school that misalignment was ever kind of called out or brought into my awareness. But I stuck true to myself. I don't know if it's just because I'm a Libra or what it is, but my internal, sense of determination knew who I was. And so when I was 12, I transitioned at school. And this was at a moment in 2012 where, trans the topic of trans kids was nowhere near the level of mainstream awareness that we have now. The conversation simply wasn't being had. And for that reason, right, there was no infrastructure, there was no curriculum, there were no school policies that directly outlawed or criminalized the existence of trans kids, right? But there were also nothing that supported my existence. And so being outed at school, while also being told by my administration not to transition because it would cause a disruption. Again, being the Libra that I am, I said, I'm going to step into my truth. I'm going to step into my power. And that's exactly what I did. And it was through getting on, the school bus in my Forever 21 leggings and my fake Doc Martens, and letting people know, right, exactly who I was and exactly how I was going to show up. I became very aware, very quickly, how my transness was going to be policed, right? And so I wasn't allowed to go to the bathroom as often as other kids. I was not allowed to use the girls' or the boys' bathroom that was located in my middle school. I had to go down 2 flights of stairs across an open courtyard into an elementary school and use one of the non-gendered bathrooms inside of the nurses' suite. And so for that reason, because how long it took me to go to the bathroom, my teacher stopped letting me go. And that trickled over into a lot of other kinds of practices that ultimately placed my physical, emotional, mental health in such risk, followed with also being beat up in school and nothing being done about it, because I was trans, because I was queer, because a lot of the administrators there felt that that's exactly what I deserved or what they would do to their children if they were like me. And so all of those practices made it impossible for me, as you said, Daniela, and Ola, to thrive. And so thankfully, I was able to connect with organizations like the Human Rights Campaign, the National Center for Transgender Equality, and then later NBJC, where I now am a fellow, to create policy changes. And so I've always understood myself as an artist first, and that activism is my art. It is through existing every day as myself, through telling my story and the story of my community, that I'm effecting change. So I stand here to bring my experience from what it is being a trans girl, and what it is going from trans girlhood to trans womanhood, and the ways that I've interacted with these medical systems and these political systems that have yielded many of the same results for us, cis and trans. And so my connection to this conversation is one, of course, rooted in community, but also getting rid of these lines in the sand that we've drawn between cis women, trans women, Black women, disabled women, that ultimately these systems affect us and are causing harm to us in sometimes the same way, very different ways, and also ways that make the other harm possible. So it's only through dissolving those kind of lines in the sand and understanding the unique struggles of the folks and the women who are most disenfranchised and impacted by this work, but also the fact that it doesn't stop with us. It goes much deeper. And it's coming for the rest of y'all who are not currently aware and awake to it. So yeah, that's me, and I'm so excited to be here as a part of this conversation, and I can't wait to hear more.
Oh my gosh, thank you all for those powerful introductions. Also, activism is my art. I'm going to start using that because, oh my gosh. So, hi, I'm Denise, aka the facilitator, and I'm a sophomore at Berry College in Rome, Georgia, and I am majoring in wildlife conservation and minoring in anthropology. And my friends like to joke that outside of school, nothing I do really pertains to my major, but I feel like it's important for me to work on my community before I go out and work on the world. So I have been in the field of advocacy and learning about inequities and the lack of access in marginalized communities since the 10th grade. I am also a senior youth staff at the Partnership for Southern Equity, a youth ambassador for the mayor of Atlanta, a Bonner Scholar, and the co-author of Why Aren't We Doing This, which is a book talking all about intergenerational collaboration in a way that isn't tokenizing or decorating or manipulating young people. So what brings me to this field of work is that health inequities within low-income communities are just scary, and that's the bottom line. So growing up, my mom had to choose between working a shift or driving me and my sister 30 plus minutes to go to the only dentist that would take our insurance. And in my neighborhood, growing up with access to healthcare was a privilege. Why go to the hospital for stitches when you could rub Vaseline on it? Why go to the doctor for wingworm when you could put nail polish over it? Like these innovative ways my community learned to heal ourselves were not out of convenience, but it was out of necessity and survival. And my sister, who grew up just like me, she's now working in the public health field just to ensure that people who are like us are no longer invisible, so that no kid will ever have to hear that, oh, on these specific days, don't get hurt because I can't call off of work. Access to healthcare in these low income spaces should be just as accessible as it is to get tobacco or sugary drinks. And that's why I'm in this field of work, because lack of access in communities to health impacts finances, it impacts nutrition, it impacts crime rates, and it impacts everything. Like we could have a whole panel just about that. But yeah, so our first few questions are going to be about power. And power comes from a lot of different ways. I know when I was in middle school, I had my first taste of power when I joined all the clubs my school offered, which was really ambitious. But this wasn't a type of public speaking power or the power of advocacy I had unlocked yet. This was the power of avoidance. I realized that the more extracurricular activities I was occupied with at school, then I would be able to come home later and later. And one thing that a lot of people forget about when talking about low income families or communities who are suffering from inequalities is that when you're living paycheck to paycheck, anything can set you off. And to avoid that, I was just at school. So when I got to high school, I joined a youth council. Shout out to Brighter Future Youth Leadership Council. But it was the first instance where I realized that my voice had mattered so much that adults would pay for it. And that council gave me the power to see. It gave me the power to see injustices that were within my community, that were within my family, that were within me that I didn't even know about. And I didn't have the power to speak yet, but I had the power to see what was truly going on. And that was the gateway to everything. And it wasn't until my 10th or 12th grade year that I really stepped into the power that my community was feeding me. I stopped apologizing for my presence. I stopped worrying about how I represented my family and my community. And I stopped being intimidated by the very issues that I was fighting against. And I had to realize that power was a sliding scale that I needed everyone in my circle to help push me forward. Like the team that I'm a part of now, the Yes for Equity team, they were my biggest supporters, my biggest allies, and they were the driving force behind me unlocking my true potential and my true power. And with all that being said, we can actually go ahead and start the first question, which can go to Jenny Marie and or Sage. So since we are talking about power, how do you define it? And what would happen when young people realize and utilize their power?
I guess I'll go first. So I guess power, obviously power means so much more to different other people, but to me personally, power means recognizing how much power you have over your life first. And then once that's established, you start to see how your power fits in society. And then once we start understand how power shows up in us, we can get to investigate how it shows up in society. And so then we have the chance to either take action or you're being acted on and you just live with that. And then when young people start to realize that their power, they recognize the power dynamics at both the individual level and the societal level. And that's where they could decide to take action, or like I said before, being acted on. So the youth decide how they can integrate themselves into those dynamics. So that's what I believe power to me means.
I agree. I would say power to me, aside from everything that Jenny Marie just shared, because I agree, would be the ability to actualize the reality that you desire. And that's why we see people use power for terrible things, because that is the reality in which that's the reality they desire. One in which they're able to harm people and bring themselves good things. And for me personally, I recognize my power through my voice. I was never big growing up. I was really tiny. Now I'm 5'11". And I was always super small, and I had a really like soft voice, or high voice. And people had reactions to that made them uncomfortable, but somehow they were never able to ignore the things that I said out of my mouth. And I found that, you know, unfortunately, a lot of people won't speak up for you. A lot of people won't take up for me, especially if they're not impacted negatively by the situation in the way that it impacts me. A lot of people find convenience, and that's their own version of power, is remaining in the most convenient spot, and being able to position themselves right outside of harm's way, or right above the next person, or positioning themselves right under somebody who's harming the rest, and so that they don't catch the fallout, right? And so I found my power in the ability to say that I was going to be myself, which of course that's complicated by all of the privileges that I have. I had the privilege of growing up in Washington, D.C. I had the privilege of growing up in a fairly accepting, like queer accepting community and family. I had the privilege of having a mother who had access to healthcare through her job that did not have legal ramifications or exclusions for having a trans child, right? All of these different ways that my transness was protected allowed me a higher capability and capacity to fight back against the moments in which my transness was infringed on, or when my poverty was villainized and criminalized. Because I had these privileges, I was able to enact my power in those ways. And so I would say that's my understanding of power, is the ability to realize and manifest the reality in which that you desire.
Wow, thank you guys so much. To take action or be acted upon and then actualizing the reality you desire. I'm also stealing that. I feel I'm going to have a lot of quotes to take back to my friends. But okay, so moving on to the next question, this can go to Ola or Daniela. So what unique elements in your story have either helped or hindered you from being able to access or build power?
I will say this, as a Black person with a disability, think about how society values a Black body. If society doesn't value Black lives, what's the worth of a Black disabled life? We're considered worthless to people. When I'm going somewhere to speak or share my story, people feel like they can't relate to it because I'm sitting in a wheelchair and telling them. They feel like this can never happen to me. I'm a good person. I'll never end up in a wheelchair. I go to church. I pray. Karma. Why is my existence a result of karma for you? Or that I did something so bad at 9 years old that I ended up so sick and that I'm somehow deserving of this. Having to fight back stereotypes that it's because of the way you're eating and acting, not exercising enough, that has put you in this position. So having people have these ingrained ableists, a lot of people don't know what ableism is. It's discrimination against people with disabilities and a lack of not viewing us as equals, people with disabilities. And I live in two worlds. Not every wheelchair user is paralyzed. So there are times where I can walk into a room and people greet me, shake my hand. When I roll into that very same room, no one wants anything to do with me. It's like, achoo, I'm gonna sneeze on you, you're gonna get my cooties, you're gonna get my disability. And then the power structure within disability justice and disability rights. We are fighting to have space in a white-led, well, I would say it wouldn't be white-led movement, but a majority white spaces where they dominate the positions of power and authority and direct the conversation on disability rights and healthcare equity. And I will say this, as someone who has worked in politics, I remember I worked on the White House African American Kitchen Cabinet on Disability. But prior to that, I interned in the Obama White House. And I thought, this is the first time I made a choice to become a wheelchair user, meaning I could have spent my entire life being exhausted, only being able to walk half a block without clutching my chest and being tired. And I said, if I want to work in politics, I cannot only be able to walk this short amount. So I decided to become a wheelchair user and talk with my physician about it. And so I started the internship. 2 weeks later, I got my wheelchair. And I will say this, you're amongst people that you think are working towards the greater good. But when they see that you're a person of differing ability and they don't understand the range of disability, that you can walk sometimes you can't, all that jazz. On the last day of my internship, or I'm sorry, the last few days, the interns get together with some staffers, we bowl and some drink. And I actually had a staffer sit in my chair, roll it to me, and say, I brought you your wheelchair even though you don't really need it. And this was the most heartbreaking moment of my career at age 20. These places aren't often places where you can get a leadership role if you're a person with a disability. These are the people leading the conversation about healthcare equity. And they don't look at me as human. They look at me as someone who's faking my disability. I went through that in middle school. I had my heart and kidney transplant 5 hours apart in the 7th grade. So I'm out of school for several months. I come back. I have nerve damage in my right leg. Walking is still difficult. And the school bus picks me up from my house because I can't walk to the bus stop. Kids calling me lazy. Couldn't stand that I kept getting picked up and dropped off. So I was constantly being bullied on the bus. It came to a point where my mom had to just rearrange her work schedule and drop me off at school because I couldn't take it. It was so reminiscent of that moment. So you don't have people with disabilities in positions of power because ableist people like that, hold all the power and hold all the cards. We disabled people are just brought in as props when we need to make a speech about why the Affordable Care Act doesn't need to be repealed. But you will never hire us or treat us as equals, even though we have the same qualifications and more life experience.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Ola. You just reminded me of something that I'm going through right now. I have, like I said, my son has some disability and he happens to be blind and also has some chronic illness. And I'm now trying to figure out his school for him. He's really bright. He's a bright child. And I've been trying to find him because of his other chronic illness. He can't really be in a big classroom with a lot of people because he gets sick all the time. So I'm trying to find some private school where he can have smaller group of students, and that's better for his health. And I'm encountering things like, you go to a website and they say something like, we take everybody, we like diversity, but we cannot take people with certain disabilities, such as being blind, such as, it's things like that take away the power. And for a child growing up knowing that exists, it takes so much out, and for them to build that power, it's almost like a mountain for them to climb, because it's out there already before they're even they're even grown enough to understand the reality of life. So I really understand what you to whatever extent that I can understand it, and I'm glad you spoke on it. For me, with my experience, like I shared at the beginning, when I give birth to my child, it kind of helps me build some power on my end, because I realized quickly that my story was not unique, and it was not uncommon. And I also realized the power on speaking on truth and the injustices. Because a lot of the time, especially for us who are refugee, asylum, immigrant status, sometimes when we move to this country, we have this gratitude attitude, like I mentioned, where we are always, feel like we are so grateful and we can't complain. Back home, it was worse. And you can't speak on certain things. You come from a place where it was so worse than this, so you better be grateful for having even this. And that's a lot of the attitude that a lot of our people feel when they move to this country. And because of that, it's almost like they're always hiding behind their power, and they don't know what's in them. And you have to kind of build it up out of them. So when I experienced my experience, I start asking questions around me. I start finding other people around me and asking, what was your experience? What was your experience like? And I start realizing that it's not rare. My experience is not unique at all. It's not uncommon at all. And I start, and luckily, at RCP, they brought me in. That's when I actually moved to the job that I'm at right now. They brought me in to start a program, and the program was that I was building. I was building it from my personal experience, from the experience of all the other refugee and immigrant people who are part of the organization. And the program was to support members not only navigate the healthcare system, but also try to get people's first-hand experience so that we can start doing some advocacy. So that's how we start building. I start seeing that within me, I have power. When I start speaking from the hospital, when I start speaking on truth, I start seeing the change in dynamic. Now, I had something to say. So I realized that if I start speaking the truth and touch on the injustices, that built me up. It changes the dynamic in the room. So I was like, how do I do this so that it's not only for me, but start building that part from the community? So with the program that we have, we take people's first-hand experience. We support people survive, like we mentioned, survive through supporting them navigating the healthcare system. But we also collect people's experience, and we use that experience, first of all, to bring it back to the community so that the community starts realizing that they hold power. You have something to say. This experience should not happen to begin with. And start using that same story to bring it back to our local hospitals, our local institution, and hopefully our healthcare system to start getting people accountable. And that's how we build power from within, and that's how we bring even intergenerational power, right? From one community, from one person to a community, from one generation to another. Right now, I'm going back to my child's story, I'm going to those schools, knocking on doors and be like, okay, you want to diversify your group. What is it about my son that you can't do this? I'm going to start doing it for my son, and I'm going to teach my son to do the same thing and build his own power. And we're going to not only do that for ourselves, we're going to find a community and build that power as well, because we need to change that power dynamic. And a lot of people hold so much power that they don't know that they hold. And it is for us who have that realization, it is we need to change the game now. We need to start supporting others to stand in their power, because as a community, if we come now my English is going. If we come together, there's so much power that we are standing in, and it's now time to break the dynamic or to switch the dynamic whenever it's necessary. So that's where I feel like my experience has helped me build the power within, but also build the power around me. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank you guys so much for answering that question. Daniela, you brought a great point about marginalized groups feeling guilty for being uncomfortable and upset about being oppressed and discriminated, and then them having to build up that courage to actually talk about it. So thank you so much for that. Thank you. So our next question, okay. So our next question is kind of a free for all, and anyone can answer. So what happens when we center intergenerational power, or what is possible when we center a shared power model between youth and adults? And how do we move from a personal power to a collective power?
I'd love to share something kind of quickly off of that. I would say I think a lot of the times the decisions that people who are in power make to make themselves feel a little bit better, they make without consulting the communities who are most in need, right? So they say, I want to do a fundraiser for trans kids, and I'm going to just create some idea, some charity that may have been recommended to me by, the 6 other people who have as much money as I do. None of them have trans kids or trans relatives. But, they have as much money as me. They know where to put it. And, we're going to do this thing for this community, but it's really, really just someone make us feel better. It's performative, but it's also in a way that's not informed. And because it's not informed, there's not going to be a comprehensive and authentically tangible effect of that, right? A lot of the times that money is not going to reach the communities who it was said that to be raised for. A lot of the times the mode of support isn't even relevant, right? Sometimes we're not needing large mass donations to kind of national organizations, but smaller mini grants, micro grants dispersed amongst grassroots mutual aid funds, and folks who are tapped into the true, real, living trans people in that community. So a lot of the times those decisions are made without the people who are supposed to be impacted consulted at the table, of course, without our lived experience being honored and really us leading those conversations. And then I think the importance of an intergenerational power dynamic and harvesting that power is the fact that folks from an older generation, one, yes, they have had the context of their life. They've seen these fights begin and maybe transpire in ways before. And so they have, solutions from time before, but they also have the power given to them as adults, the power given to them as elders. They have this power, and that falls into things of respectability politics. And just like that, they are empowered because they are older to make decisions that can be really transformative and can cause that can have great outcomes if they acknowledge and value the experience of young people. Young people today are more connected than we've ever been before. Young people today are, very tapped into the real life context of existing as a young person and existing as a student and existing as, even just taking things just as like taking the train or how to find work or what the medical experience of going to and seeking medical help is as a teenager. There's so many point of views and experiences that need to be heard from older folks that of course there can be kind of solutions created there just by sharing, here's what I'm experiencing now and here's what I was experiencing when I was your age. But I think that a lot of times that's where it ends. And unfortunately, a lot of the times it ends as like, well, it was way harder when I was younger. And that's this kind of passing on of trauma that we get from our older folks, and a lot of the times from our parents, right? Well, it was much harder for me to do this when I was younger, and for that reason, you should normalize this pain. You should normalize this difficulty. And a lot of people are not doing what Danielle is doing and teaching their children how to advocate for themselves and build their own power. They're teaching, like I think it was Jenny Marie. I don't want to misquote it, but they're teaching their children the power of avoidance. They're teaching their children to avoid speaking up and becoming, unfortunately, be labeled disruptors, right? Which I love the fact that I'm a disruptor. I don't want to be simple. I don't want to be agreeable. I don't want to be easy to get along with. Unless you're really my sister and like we're really in community and we have the same values, then I'm all here for that, right? But for the majority of what is going on in the world, I'm not down with that. And so it's really important that we teach each other that, and that we don't stop at that. Well, this is what it was like when I was younger and stuff like that. And there are so many older people who are listening to the young people. My boss, David Johns, who's been my mentor since I was 15 years old, brought me to the Congressional Black Caucus, brought me to the White House, like taught me how to speak for myself and advocate for myself in ways that I am now able to really take up for myself in the world, that otherwise just wouldn't be possible without the support of that intergenerational dynamic.
I will say this, within the disability rights movement, our leaders some of them are still very much alive, and all respect due to all the hard work that they've done. But there are some people who really just do not want to share the cookie. It is of the greatest importance that previous generations learn how to pass the torch, teach, and let go. there is a refusal to allow young people to be in leadership positions. And not just that, the sensitivity to critiques of past movements. There's been a complete erasure. I constantly, in my social media platforms, I constantly share Black disabled history. There's been a complete erasure in disability history of how much Black people, Black disabled people played a part in it. For example, the Black Panthers played a huge role in the 504 sit-ins. Specifically, a Black Panther who was disabled and who was a part of the disability rights movement, even in providing food, water, things to disabled protesters that were so needed. And we are completely invisible. And to bring up racism and how maybe if the disability rights movement focused on intersectionality, maybe we could make some advances in healthcare equity, giving them the brutal and honest truth that, hey, if America wasn't so invested in racism, maybe healthcare, Medicaid specifically, disability, they wouldn't be viewed as entitlements for the lazy. This is so deeply associated with the Black welfare queen stereotype. And had you addressed this early on, there wouldn't be the disability, the poverty trap of disability. So my problem is a failure to step aside and genuinely mentor people. I'm 32. I'm in my mentorship years. I'm not technically still a young adult, but if I see someone who I see is struggling with their disability identity, who hated themselves just like I did. I was using a wheelchair at age 20 and going, yeah, I'm not really like them. I was in a disability internship program living with disabled people, and and I wasn't doing disability work. Like, they allowed me to intern at the White House. I got an internship outside of the disability program and they funded me. But all the other interns were working on disability specific projects. And I'm just still like, oh, I can walk, so I'm not really like them. Hating myself, never having met another Black disabled woman. And then I saw Claudia Gordon. She is the first Black deaf woman attorney in the United States. Also a former model who had a billboard in Times Square. I'm seeing her speak at the White House. Like, okay, I'm not dropping out of school. I'm not dropping out of college. I can do anything just by her presence alone. And, I got to know other Black women in the movement, and I was like, this is my tribe. And they did things for me people outside of that group would never. And that is the power of knowing your age and when it is to pass the torch. And not to be ageist, but that can happen at any age. I wish I had the opportunity to mentor people who were disabled teens when I was in my early 20s. You can be a mentor at any age, but don't hog all the opportunities. Not everything is meant for you. I'm not speaking on, if someone comes to me and they want someone to speak on what it's like to be on disability or Medicaid, I'm not doing it. I've had private health insurance my whole life. So pass the torch. Stop trying to speak on behalf of the issues you know nothing about. Check your own internalized ableism and privilege and pass the torch.
Thank you so much for that. So we are getting close to the end, so we'll have one more question. So in our narrative plenary, we talked about the power of storytelling and the narratives to build power. So we know that in order to shift narratives, we must center those most historically marginalized and impacted. But oftentimes this practice is inauthentic and harmful. So our question is, what are some signs or indicators of performative or inauthentic engagement?
I just wanted to be real quick again. I'm a storyteller, and so this question just gets me really excited to answer. I think that something that I practice at my own creative studio team, we were created back in 2018, and we're not interested in senseless and purposeless narratives of violence and harm, right? We know how hard it is, and we know how violent it is. And, you know, a lot of us have been, myself, the victim of this harm and the victim of this physical violence, right? And so every story about a Black trans girl on Netflix that I want to watch, I don't want to see her sexually assaulted. I don't want to see her beaten. I don't want to see her rejected from her home, because we all know this, right? But what we don't get to see presented is also the love that we also know, the happiness, the success, the breadth and richness of having community, right? And so I am so frustrated with the way that Blackness has been synonymized with trauma, pain, and harm in all of the largest blockbuster movies that we get to see every year, right? I mean, the series on Amazon Prime, Them, frustrated me, right? We saw the murder of a Black infant on television. The Last of Us on HBO, every Black character was shot or killed on camera, and the only children who were murdered on screen were Black child actors. So like the ways that we tell these stories contribute to the ways that violence happens in real life, and the ways that we are desensitized, normalize, and accept those violences as realities of the world, right? And when we don't normalize, and when we don't show and represent the immense love that there is on the other side of coming out, on the other side of becoming a trans woman, on the other side of becoming a mother, right? When we don't show that love is not expected, it's not normalized. And yes, I'm 100% behind the creation of those narratives, because it's also true that a lot of us have not ever seen or have not ever believed that we could experience the kind of love that I want to show in my films, that I want to show in my stories. But it's first through even reading it, seeing it, believing that there's a possibility, right? That I was able to open myself up to that love in real life. So that to me is the difference between performative allyship and, again, having those conversations of the folks who are impacted with the lived experience, not being in the writer's room, not being producers, not being on last looks, not being on hair and makeup, and the people who and not being behind the camera, right? We have to be integrated at every level of storytelling in order for it to be authentic, in order for it to be impactful, and to truly have positive effects. As long as we continue to allow the stories about us to be written without us, they will be, again, creating these realities and futures in which they want us to stay complicit in, and to stay stagnant in. And so I want to change that through the photos that I take, the stories that I tell, the interviews that I write. So that to me, that's my answer.
I definitely agree with everything Sage just said. So I feel like, I guess we just need to understand that putting people in those positions, holding their hands, coming along with them, doesn't take from your power, right? So if I have a child that's aspiring to go into the philanthropy world, we have to make their story shine just as much my story already shine. And so, like, we have to separate our ego from the power. So when we see inauthentic things happen in shows and nonprofits and any type of thing, we have to realize that it can be authentic simply by asking the community what we need. Communities are easy to access, right? So obviously we have jobs, we have things to do. But once you reach out and actually go out into the city and simply ask, hey, what do you need from, for example, I live in Newark. There's a lot of people that go out and ask different organizations that come together and ask the community. And they will tell you their whole story if they can, honestly. And so when we go out to the communities, that's where you could get everything authentic. It's not hard, and we just need to separate our ego from ourselves and realize that everyone has something to say, and that we can integrate all those things and make something authentic. And so I just want to say it quickly so everyone else could say something else too.
And come with the money behind it. Don't just show up on the blog asking people for advice and not paying for it. Like, stop that. That's performative. So.
I did want to interject and specifically call names. I've lived through it all, so I don't have nothing to lose. So specifically, I know what performative allyship with the disabled community is, and I'm going to specifically name the Congressional Black Caucus and other organizations that refuse to use the name disability, refuse to even want to include our work with disability rights organizations. They will have events called health whatever, and they will be poorly promoted. Not even have interpreters, not have any room for accommodations requests. Like, there has been an active role Congressional Black Caucus has done in excluding disabled people for years. Aside from that, it is not socially acceptable to criticize people with disabilities unless, even if you're in the disabled community, it's not acceptable, but I do not care. There's a lack of honesty there, and performative allyship and performative work looks like centering your story as inspiration. I'm going to start a TikTok showing all the things disabled people can do. Wow, I didn't know disabled people could bathe themselves. Wow, I didn't know disabled people could drive the vehicle. Wow, I didn't know disabled people could cook their own meals. Blind people. I'm a writer, so I get pitches week after week of people asking me to cover disabled people or people who work in disability, and they use terrible terminology like special needs. They support groups like Autism Speaks is one of the worst organizations. Even autistic people don't support them and have called them a hate group. And I had someone come in and analyze me, like company come in and analyze me I measured me for a new wheelchair. And the person has puzzle pieces on their shoes. And I'm like, oh God. So you bought the propaganda that disability needs to be fixed, or that you are just inspiring by nature of being disabled and having a lot of health conditions. We call that inspiration porn. Please stop sharing stories. I know that you're an ally. I know you're an ally if you're not afraid to use the word disabled. I know that you're not performing disability justice work if you're not afraid to identify as disabled. There's a level of denialism. What is differently abled? There's an entire agenda to get you to not identify as disabled because you won't be able to sue for your rights. There is no Differently Abled Act. There is no Handy-Capable Act. We don't use handicap. Like, those words are archaic. I understand not everyone's going to be up on the new terminology, but when you see that denialism and you see that people are just inspirational for being disabled, and those, feel good news stories about this person who just didn't give up and didn't kill themselves the moment they became disabled, that's when I know it's not just disability justice work. It is self-adulation, narcissism, and internalized and lateral ableism.
Can I just say one thing? I know that we are out of time. One thing, when you bring up stories about people, they're front of it, but also they're expert. We compensate expertise, please. That's one thing that I just wanted to emphasize. We compensate expertise. And when we bring community and to hear from community, they are expert in the field. So their time is valuable. And we compensate that. Even in the room, the way we formulate our question, it has to come from like, you are the expert. I'm just here writing. Thank you.
Well, I've been loving this session so much. Oh my gosh. So the very, very last question is, can you please leave some session participants today with one task or one thing to consider daily, and tell us what that would be and why?
Okay, so it got to do with everything we talked about. So I would say reflect on your work. How can you offer a space in your work to create authentic, meaningful opportunities for youth voices? And doing so creates a safe environment for authentic youth voices to emerge. So if you create a safe environment, they're more susceptible to telling you everything they want to tell you. And then it benefits from youth. So the benefits from youth and adult partnership include additional perspectives, energizing the workspace, much more. So letting go of that ego that, oh, I'm in charge, I'm the CEO. Once you open up that mind and listening to all the youth, you create so much other things you didn't even realize that you could have with them. And so that's why I leave everyone. Open doors for the people behind you. And that's mine.
I would say figure out what you need, figure out what your cup is, because I'm very strong on like pouring into other people's cups and supporting my community. But I've been doing this work since I was 12. We've all been doing this work for a very long time. I'm not the first person to say it, and I won't be ashamed to say that nonprofit work is exhausting. A lot of the times you're overpaid, you're overworked and overpaid. I wish it was the other way around, but it's not, right? And like doing this is hard and it's tiresome, and I need to be real with myself about what I need, what kind of safe space I need in order to create safe spaces for others. What do I need in order to even be able to open that door in the first place and hold it open for everyone coming in behind me? So be honest, and like realistic isn't really a word that I like to just throw around, but like, be real, be honest with yourself about the things that you need, and like hold yourself and the people around you accountable to making sure that your cup is full so that you can do the same. And it's okay to take care of yourself and to look out for yourself so that, sometimes, you have to take care of yourself so that you can take care of your friends and your family and truly show up. Because if you're just drained all the time, whatever you're putting out is not nourishing anyone.
I would say, working with community is not about accommodation. It's creating a space where you are in deep, reciprocal, messy relationship with one another. Flexibility is a necessity to do this work. And also go and think about what you value. What are your values and how do you put this value into practice? The more you practice this value, the better of an advocate you will be. Thank you.
I will say this, disability will happen to you. I am you and you are me. If you plan on living to old age, without a shadow of a doubt, you may develop an illness. It is very rare for someone to live to age 70, 80, 90, and never have a chronic condition. You should care because I am you, you are me, and these aren't my rights that I'm fighting for. They're yours too. Lastly, think about the language that you use. On a daily basis, do you use idiot, dumb, stupid, mad, crazy, insane? If you have time, look up the history behind those words. Those were actual medical diagnoses. Deaf, Dumb, and Blind Act, they consider people who are deaf or blind to be dumb. These were actual medical diagnoses, and you could become incarcerated in medical facilities, just based on your disability alone. And we use the words casually like it's nothing. I'm not saying take it out of your vocabulary, but disability is so rooted in your language, you don't even realize you're talking about it. So thank you for even participating in this, because this is action in and of itself. It takes education to lead. It takes education to be an ally.
If I
Thank
could
you guys.
I'm sorry. If I could say one more thing, quick little fact, science fact. If you stop yourself from being mean, if you stop yourself from calling somebody stupid, if you stop yourself from all these things, your neural pathways restart and then they build a new one. And so that you're less susceptible of being mean, of being, let's say, racist, of being all these negative things. If you continually stop yourself, your neural pathways redevelop and they're new ones, and then you're less susceptible of being mean to someone or stopping someone from getting a job or stuff like that. Just want to throw that out there.
Okay, thank you guys. So sorry for going a bit over, but this panel was so powerful. I feel like I can do anything in the world right now. So thank you guys for joining us, and a huge thanks to our panelists for giving us so many nuggets of wisdom. I definitely typed some quotes out on my computer. I hope to see you guys tomorrow in our next panel. So see you guys later.
Bye. Thank you.